Welcome back to Soul Good Podcast. This is episode number 27. This is going to be a very different episode compared to the rest of them because if you've been listening to this podcast or if you're new here, this podcast is typically me having a guest on here talking about what their creative outlet is and kind of how they got going. Or if it's just me talking, then it's just about my personal life and stuff that's going on in my head. And so this episode is going to be a lot different. This is an episode I've been thinking about putting out for a long time now. I've been watching a bunch of videos on YouTube lately that have kind of, I guess, pushed/inspired me to put this out. And I'm kind of putting myself out there in this episode. So it's kind of a really, really personal episode, if you will. But anyway, before I get started talking about this subject, I want to say that this podcast in particular is going to be talking about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is something that I am not a medical professional on. I don't have like all the facts perfectly straight on it. All I have is what it is from a medical website in front of me here. And I'm going to be on this episode sharing my experiences with it, things that people have told me and stuff of that nature. So hopefully maybe you can listen to this episode and either relate or kind of take what I'm saying, maybe have something to take away. I don't know, whatever that may be, but just letting you know that I'm not like the facts guy with this. So it's, again, just my experiences. So with that said, I'm going to kind of be covering some examples of when I've experienced this throughout my life. And I'm going to let you know kind of when I first started experiencing this up till about now. So first off, this is something that I have been working on for quite a while now, probably the last like 3 or 4 months, and just trying to like find ways to navigate it and not let it affect me as much as it has previously. And I've actually been able to like find different like coping mechanisms. So maybe I'll kind of go over that in the end of this episode. But first off, I noticed this happening in my life when I started to become more of a social person. I've always been like a very social person throughout my life, between like meeting new people, going places. But it wasn't until like around my freshman year of college that I started to see more and more people going out, and I was like not going out as much as other people, which blew me away because I always thought I was very social. And I was like, well, I guess I need to find something else to do. And so that something else was going to shows. And I started noticing this the more shows that I went to. But the first time I ever noticed it was when I went to a show with a group of about 5 people. I came home from that show, and I remember I couldn't go to sleep till about 3 a.m. that night. I genuinely spent about like 2 or 3 hours sitting there replaying every social interaction I had that night in my head. And going off that, I'm going to let you know the definition of this so that you can get a good idea. So I'm on webmd.com right now. It says, what is rejection sensitive dysphoria? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so ADHD, makes it harder for people to focus, pay attention, and sit still. Most people who have ADHD are also very sensitive to what people think or say about them. This is sometimes called rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is not a medical diagnosis, but a way of describing certain symptoms associated with ADHD. Dysphoria comes from a Greek word that means hard to bear. People who have RSD don't handle rejection well. They get very upset if they think someone has shunned or criticized them, even if that's not the case. And so going off of that, I'm going to say right out the gates that I've never actually been medically or like diagnosed by a doctor with ADHD. I'm not saying that I don't have it, but I've never actually like gone in. There's probably a good chance that I have it because I've been like very distracted with random things throughout my life. And I'm going to say that there's a good majority of people that probably have this, especially now with like social media and everything and our phones. I'm sure it's like way more common now, and again, it's okay if you have it. I probably think I have it, and which is what leads to me having rejection sensitive dysphoria. And also, another thing I want to say is I had no idea what this was until one day a friend of mine posted what this was on Twitter, and I was reading this definition of what he wrote, and I read it twice, and I read it 3 times, and 4 times, and 5, and I was like, this is like the biography of my life all in one little tweet. Like, what's going on here? And it was because it was something that I had experienced, and I saw this tweet maybe like top of this year, maybe end of last year sometime. And so I didn't fully figure out what this was until then. And I'm glad that I figured out what it was, but it was honestly a little bit scary at first because I was like, oh no, I don't want to admit that I have this. Even though it's not like a medical diagnosis, I was just like sitting there like, oh no. But then I realized like, hey, you know what? If this is something that is happening to you, this is what it is. And you just got to take it in. Sometimes you just got to take it in. And so the more I've read about it, the more people I've talked to, the more I've realized, okay, like this is what it is. This is a thing, and that's okay. And that's okay. And so back to what I was saying earlier is I noticed this when I was going out to shows with groups of friends in college. And the first show that I came back from, I was, like I said, in my bed just laying there thinking like, all right, what did I say to this person? What did I say to this person? And like shows, you typically end up bumping into like people, you meet new people. And so you talk to new people. And I've always like grown up with the mindset of like, all right, you don't want to like piss people off, right? Like you always want to make the other person happy, or you want to walk away from like a social situation and have that person be like, oh, Max was great, which is like, I don't know if that's all that realistic, to be quite honest. I think part of life is you piss people off and you're going to make others happy no matter what you do. There's not really like a middle ground there. I guess there kind of can be, but you get what I'm trying to say. And so that's probably part of it. But it's crazy because I was like, all right, I was talking about my life with this person, telling them when I like grew up and telling them this and telling them that. And I started to think like, man, did I like tell this person too much? Did I like talk their head off? Because some people are like kind of scared by that when you meet someone, you tell them like too much. Some people are like, it kind of like throws people off and kind of scares them away from you in certain situations. So I was like, oh my God, did I do that? And I overthought literally everything. And I started to go word by word. And I'm like, geez, man. By the end of the night, I was just like convinced that like 4 to 5 people completely hated me. And I'm like, oh no. Like, what can I tell someone to like absolve this situation here? And from there, it just kind of went on, and it like carried throughout my life. And the more people that I met and the more social I became, it just got more and more and more prevalent. And so I'm going to kind of go down the line of some examples so that hopefully you can kind of get a little, I guess, scoop on what I've experienced and get kind of like some insights, I guess. So something I've wrote down here is this happens to me whenever someone tells me no without a detailed answer. So by that, I mean, not that someone saying no has to give me an exact answer. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying this happens when that happens. So if I'm like, if I say something and then someone's like no, then I'm like, I will freeze up, straight up freeze up and be like, why did they say no? And I'll start running down the line of like, did they say no because what I said was bad? Did they say no because like I upset them? Did they say no because, and you just run down the line. And that's just one very surface level example. Another example that I wrote down here that is very, very, very prevalent in my life, and this is probably one of the hardest ones to work on, and one that I'm like continually working on right now. But this is on social media. Whenever I get like a scene in messages, or I get like a no like comment between a bunch of comments that are liked and then mine is not liked, even though what I wrote isn't bad or has nothing to do with anything, what will happen is I'll read like a perfectly normal message that I sent someone and I'll go, what did I say? What upset them? And that's where my mind goes. My mind will immediately run to, what did I say that upset them? Or how could this person have interpreted it? And you start thinking about how that person is like interpreting what you're saying. And it's very weird because it's not realistic to try to like assume someone else's mindset. Like there's so many other reasons why that person either didn't respond or gave you a short response. It's like they're busy. They're out doing stuff. Maybe they just read it and they're going to respond later. Maybe they read it to respond later and then they forgot. There's reasons A to Z. And that's what I have to tell myself lately. And real quickly too, before I keep going this episode, I do want to preface this, is that I know there's going to be people commenting, being like, oh, you should see a therapist about that. This is what people go to therapy for. Yeah. Hey, yeah, I know that. And honestly, I think it's kind of crazy when people do just kind of come up to you and be like, you should go to therapy, because A, it costs money, and okay, yeah, I'm in a position where I can afford it because of privilege, but it's crazy that there's people out there telling other people to go to therapy when there's people out there that can't afford it or be in a position to even go. And it's also very hard to find like a therapist that is like perfect for you. So that's another hurdle of it. So it's very weird when someone's like, go to therapy. But anyway, that aside, back to what I was saying is this will happen to me a lot on social media when I leave a comment and there's no like on my comment and there's likes on other comments. What I'll do is I'll start reading everybody else's comment. Like I'll read like literally 35 comments and then I'll read mine and I'll see how much different mine is compared to the rest of those comments. And then I'll see someone else with like almost an identical comment as mine. And then I'm like, wait a minute. What did I say that was so wrong? And then I'll go, oh, maybe because I repeated what someone else said. And again, I'll probably keep repeating this, but I'll run down the line of like, what were they thinking? You start coming up with excuses for why they didn't like your comment. But again, this is all back to the fact that they probably didn't see it. So it's a very like weird thing, but it's something that is very prevalent in my life. So another example of this is when you're meeting someone for the first time. And this has happened to me quite a few times now. Whenever I meet someone for the first time, and I think this applies to a lot of other people too, you always want to leave like a good impression on that person, especially when they've never known you before. Because it's always like weird when you walk away from a social situation, especially even when like, think about when you meet someone for the first time, right? And like, I don't know, maybe this person's like saying some like terribly like racist things or something. Well, you're just going to walk away and be like, wow, that person was just racist. Or maybe this person is saying some like very strange, like, I don't know, homophobic things. And you're like, wow, this person is homophobic or whatever it is, right? And so that's always like what your first impression is of someone, depending on like what they're saying. And oftentimes, I think the first impression I leave on a lot of people is that I talk too much, to be quite honest. And I'm sure there's people that might be listening to this even that have walked away from a situation where they've been like, man, he doesn't shut up. And hey, you know what? That's my life. That's okay. That's why I'm making this freaking podcast. But you get my point on first impressions. And to me, I always want to be like kind. And that's not even just me forcing that. That's just who I am. I always want to be nice to people, treat people how I would think they would treat me back, right? And usually, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 out of 10 times, that's how it ends up working. And every now and then, you'll meet someone that you come across, and just for whatever reason, you leave a bad taste in their mouth right out the gates, and you'll never find out why. You'll never know why. And it's so crazy that I'll sit here in those situations and go, why do they not like me? Hey, who cares? there's so many other people in the world. There's so many other people. And I guess why I'm talking about all this too is because at the end of the day, I think there's people out there that have this, but don't want to admit it, because I've been bringing this up to a couple of my friends within my like immediate friend group recently, and people have been responding like, "Oh my God, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that." And I think it's a matter of like realizing what it is. I'm not saying that people for sure have this, because I'm not an expert on this, but I think it's a very like common thing, especially, I think social media probably has a play in it based on what I was saying earlier, and that we all have social media now. So my next thing that I wrote down here is, this happens to me a lot when I'm sharing a new idea with someone that is not exactly like someone that I would typically share a new idea with, because I'll think like, oh my God, what are they going to say? And I'll run down the line of like a million things that they could possibly say. And this is a very weird one, because I think oftentimes when you have a new idea or just have an idea in general, it's always good to hear like both sides of the coin before you like dive into that new idea, right? If like you're just talking about something and someone's like, you know what? No, that's a horrible idea. Then you have like 8 people saying that and 2 people are like, oh, that's a great idea. Then, hey, it's probably a bad idea. But it's always weird when you're sharing a new idea with someone and someone totally is like, no, that's like the worst idea I've heard. Like, I don't even know why you'd like think of that. And for me, when that happens, I start running down the line of like, oh God, I probably shouldn't have shared that. And now this person will probably think differently of me. And again, it's not that it matters. This is something I've worked on. I don't really care about that now because I know what I'm like thinking. I know that is not realistic. And it's a very, very, very strange dynamic. But that's kind of why I try to like keep a lot of like new ideas I have, a lot of like new thought processes towards stuff with just some immediate close friends, because I know how they're going to like interpret what I'm saying, and they're going to think, oh yeah, this is kind of how Max is thinking about it, and that's why he said this. So that's why it's like different and interesting when you share it with someone who's new, because they don't quite understand how your brain works, as opposed to like someone like your family would, or someone like someone in your immediate friend group. So the next example I wrote down here is kind of along the lines of that too, kind of the same thing, but a lot of like what if situations this will happen. And it's just me kind of going, well, what if like I'd tried this, or what if I like went and did this, or what if, and they're all like what ifs that are in my head. But as soon as I start saying, I'm like, this person's going to think I'm a psychopath for that what if. And at the end of the day, you don't want to like upset someone with what you're saying, which is why I default to this. And I guess I kind of covered that already with the last situation. But another thing that I wrote down here is this one is very, I guess, sort of heavy, sort of not. This one happens when like people that are close to me just at face value like ignore me. So I could say something to someone and literally be like face to face, and they'll just like walk past me, or they'll just like shut down and not say anything. And this is a weird one, because this can be one of two things. This can be either someone not knowing how to respond to what you're saying, or what you're saying is very weird, or this can be that someone that's just how they are, and there's nothing you can do about that. And in your head, you assume that someone else is gonna like think about this how you are. And that's why I should have brought up earlier, is like a lot of this comes from assumptions. And I don't think it's okay to assume how other people are gonna think of something, or how someone else is gonna like interpret something else you're saying. I don't think that's fair to another person because you're kind of just putting that on them, and that's not really like their thing. So that's like a very weird one. The next one that I wrote down here is, I guess it's kind of the same thing, but I guess to kind of dive into more of a personal experience, I have had this happen before. In a previous relationship, this happened to me, and I walked away from this happening. I'm not going to get too specific here just to leave the like person out of the situation, but that time that it happened to me, I think it took me like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks to like start to think that that person enjoyed me again. And I was like, wow. Because I literally had like the worst week and a half, 2 weeks of my life when that happened. That is like the worst possible scenario with this, is someone just flat out ignoring you to your face. And to me, it does not get any worse than that. And who knows? Maybe there's people that do have experienced this and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, I hope to God you don't experience this. It is like truly like the worst situation with what I'm talking about, to be clear. Another situation that I wrote down here is how this kind of used to, I wouldn't say anymore, I've kind of navigated this now, but this used to affect my work life a lot. It would start with me getting an email about a project I did and being like, you'd read this email that would say like, hey, I like the video, da 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 da. And as soon as I saw that word but, I would just like close my computer and just sit down to myself for like 2 or 3 minutes and be like, but what? But what? Because you think that like you made this great video and that they're going to like it because you like it and you're like, wow, I'm very proud of this. And then you see that but and you're just like, oh, and it just hits you. It just hits you so hard and you're thinking like, what did I do that I messed up? What did I do that I messed up? And I've said this kind of earlier, but a lot of this is like the strive to be like perfect, to not have this like faulty end of yourself, I guess, which is so not realistic. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone messes up. And so I would open up the computer about 3 or 4 minutes later and be like, and it would say like, but can you adjust this and change this and move this here, da da da. And it was just stuff that wasn't actually me. It was just like someone else's preferences. And in some cases it was stuff that I did that I was like, oh shoot, I did mess up. But it was just the fact that there was like the but this and that paragraph. Or if I open up an email or a text, like just on a whim, if I'm like totally done with the project and then like 4 or 5 hours later I open up this text to this exact little thing that I need to do, or this exact little thing that I'm like, oh no. And I'll like internally shut down, but externally I'll be like right on top of it. I'll be like, all right, cool, I'm fixing it right now. Like I'll just drop everything I'm doing to fix something. And so that's kind of how I go about it. But nowadays I don't let it affect me anymore. I've kind of learned how to like navigate that in the work sense of things. Because like I said, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. And if people didn't tell you that you're wrong, there's no way you can become a better person or learn. Next thing here that I wrote down. Oh man. Ooh, this one is one of the top worst ones for me, at least. Again, speaking out of personal experiences, but my God, on dating apps, this one is so bad. And I've had to delete all the apps because I just cannot for the life of me handle this. And this is probably where I should talk to a professional about this, but I'm talking to my camera. My God. So dating apps people have been very like known to not respond to other people. I'm not just saying me personally, but to other people in general. It's a very common thing for people to not respond. Sometimes people hit the like button on you by accident. they hit the like button and then they delete the app. They hit the like button and they're messaging other people. The reasons go A to Z of why someone else didn't respond to you on there. But for me, when I'm on the apps and I see someone's profile that is literally like, I'm into dogs, I'm into like skateboarding, I'm into like da-da-da-da, and they'll like literally, I'm saying that because they'll list like 3 things that they're into that perfectly align with like these things that I'm just so close to as well. And I'll message them and get no response. And I'm like, out of 150 people, that had to be the person that was going to respond, because we have just so much in common. And it like blows my mind every time. Like, how did this person not respond? How? And I'll get really brutally honest with you guys here. And I know this is not right to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I've taken this as far as to convince myself, because I like to blame myself first in these situations. And I guess that's how I've always been. Just I like to like think like, all right, what did I do first before I like put blame on someone else? And so I'm like, is it how I look? Is it my looks that have, and oh my God, that is the worst that I've actually done. The fact that I've actually done that and been like, oh, it's the way I look. That's why they're not responding. I don't think that's the reason why. And some people might argue that it is. Some people, like I've seen it on TikTok, and I make the joke all the time about it because I think it's funny, because I don't think it's true. But like you'll see it on TikTok. People will be like, step 0, look attractive. It's like, okay, it's a joke, but maybe in some odd chance, I do believe that there is some sort of stigma out there with people that like you because of how you look. And maybe that's not stigma. Maybe there's a part in that holds some truth. But I don't think that's the whole underlying thing. I think it's how you approach the situation. Maybe the person's not there. Again, reasons A to Z. But dating apps trigger this so bad for me. And especially when it comes to, again, meeting someone for the first time, and even if you do meet up with that person and they don't want to see you again, when you've talked to them on the app and had a great conversation and you're there in person and then they don't like you, it's like that will even trigger it for me, because I'm like, how do we get along so well on the phone and like on an app, but then in person, like what? And that part I've actually understood a lot more as of like the last like year or so. It's kind of sunk in more with me and resonated with me, the actual reasons why. And there was one specific time that I can point to where I had to call a bunch of friends over this, because there was someone that I matched with on there that I thought, wow, this person and I are into like the same things. We have like the same exact personality and have the same personality type. And we also went to like the same school. All these crazy random things that were in common. And that was just a couple examples. And we talked on the phone. We did like a FaceTime and got along super well. It was like, I was just like, wow, this has never happened to me before on an app. And all of a sudden, like, I went to message them, I think a few days later, and I didn't get a response. And I was like, huh? That's weird. And I was like, whatever, I'll let it be. And it was like a week later and there was still no response. And I was like, what on earth? Like, what did I do to upset this person? And I just kept blaming myself for like, oh, maybe when I said this. And I had to call like 3 or 4 friends to be like, hey, look, this is the situation. These are all, hey, this is everything that I said. This is everything, verbatim. And sometimes it's even hard to tell people what you've said verbatim, because it's like, how are they supposed to like believe you? But you're the one that knows what you said. So then you're like, all right, this is exactly what I said. And then I'll tell my friends this, and then they'll be like, "Oh no, you didn't say anything wrong. Like it's probably just them." And it feels really good when you have friends that are like reassuring you that like, "Hey, you didn't actually mess up." And I think I had a friend that told me like, "Oh, maybe cuz this or something." And sometimes even then that will help, cuz then you'll be like, "Okay, maybe next time I just won't say that, or next time I'll try this." And it helps you grow as a person too in a way. But the fact that I have to like think about having an app on my phone and go through this like mental process in my head and deal with this all over again is not good. So that's why I've deleted the apps, because I, for the life of me, don't think I should open up my phone and be like triggered by this thing and have my days ruined, or just be totally thinking about it. And that's the one thing that I want to like make really clear about this, is that when this happens, just in any situation, it's something that I will sit there and think about for anywhere from about anywhere from about an hour to a week, depending on the severity of it. And I've had situations, like I've mentioned already, where one little 30-second conversation happens, and the rest of the week for me will just be completely ruined. I'll be like the most quiet person throughout the week, be just like dead. I won't be outgoing, and it's not a fun situation, because while someone else is talking about their thing, trying to tell me their cool story, in my head I'll be like, yep, I got rejected by this person, and I have to figure out how to make it up to them. And that's all you can think about. Nothing else is going on in your mind. But the next thing I wrote down here is, this happens to me a lot when I forget to do something for someone. So if someone's like, hey, tomorrow at like 2:30, do you mind if you go pick this up or something? And I haven't had this happen in a work situation or like a must-do situation yet, but I've had this happen in like a, hey, if you're available kind of situation, and totally have forgotten. And I'm thinking, God, there goes my trust with this person. That's the last time this person's ever going to trust me with their blah, 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 blah. Or this person's never going to ask me to do a favor for them ever again, since the first time they asked me, I totally forgot. Or maybe I have a history with forgetting with that person. And I'm like, there goes a reason for them to hate me. And this is not something that you should ever resort to like someone hating you with, because again, you can't tell how someone else is thinking, and how someone else is thinking is totally subjective. That is how someone else is thinking, and you're never going to be able to change that. And that's okay. That is okay. Sometimes you just got to let those situations go. Now, another thing that I wrote down here is, this is all kind of something that, and I think I've said this already, but it's something that comes from this kind of notion of wanting to be nice to people 24/7. And it's, you don't ever want to like say, or even this can come from not even just saying stuff. This can come from just like doing something, like a physical like action of like whatever it is. And you can just literally like, even if you're like something as simple as like shaking someone's hand, this can happen. You'd be like, oh my God, I shook their hand the wrong way. Like, this is awkward. They're gonna think I'm awkward. Or I like missed a high five with someone, or I like gave them a weird high five, or something like that can even make you go to these situations and start replaying these social interactions in your head. And I think the best thing from this is just to not blame someone. But I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into kind of how I've navigated these in just a second here. This is another situation that this has happened to me. And this is a very weird one. This is a stretch, but I feel like some people can relate. I've had plenty of situations in my life where I've been like face to face with someone, and I say something very direct, and I go, how about like if I go here at 6:30 or something? And then that person's like, hey, did you know the baseball game's on tomorrow? And you're like, whoa, hang on. Like, why didn't that person just respond to what I just said? Did they just ignore what I said? Or did anything that I was saying even before that matter? And so now this person's going to think that I'm just like talking too much, or they're not going to like me anymore because they can't acknowledge what I'm saying. And a lot of this too, I think, comes from like me wanting to be acknowledged, and like me saying stuff and people being like, oh yeah, I get why you're saying that, or yeah, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense. Just some form of acknowledgement to what I'm saying. Because as soon as someone else immediately switches up the topic on you, you think, why did they do that? And you run down the line. And it's not a fun situation to be in. But now I'm going to quickly kind of wrap this up with talking about how I've kind of dealt with this, with coming up with situations to help myself with it. And what I've realized is some of what I've talked about is just learning that everybody makes mistakes and that everyone's going to imply what you're saying differently from person to person. And I've got to the point where I've realized that there's certain things that like I should just keep to like my immediate friend group, because I don't want to like even bother to have the headspace to think of how someone else could potentially interpret it. Because if it's a close friend, then I'm like, all right, this is what they're going to think because they know how I think. And that's okay. And that's fine. You don't even have to think twice. And there's people like that in your life that you can just go tell stuff to. And that's why this podcast right here is kind of like a very like personal thing, kind of hard for me to put out there, because I'm kind of going up against my own fear, going up against my own freaking fear here. But I also make this too, and hopefully it's like comforting for the people that maybe deal with this to listen to, because I've never fully expressed my thoughts on this until this episode. So if you're listening, you're a lucky listener. But another thing too that's really helped me deal with this is talking to my friends and just actively kind of like understanding how different people think, and kind of like scratching at like surface level topics with people, trying to like understand how they're thinking before you say certain things. Because, and I know that sounds bad to say because it's not like you should be like picking apart someone's brain, but once you start to understand how someone else like is actually thinking, then you can start saying like more like, I guess, deeper topics or more about yourself to this person to fully grasp how they might interpret it, and then you feel okay about it. But when you have no idea how this person thinks and you start going on this person, you're like, oh my God, there's a whole dictionary of reasons why they're probably not going to like me. But at the end of the day too, I've learned that you have to tell yourself like, hey, look, a lot of things you're saying are good, and like they probably do like you. Why do you have to come up with situations why they don't like you? And this is a very weird thing to bring up, but there's a weird line there between like confidence and not being confident. And I think it's a very fine line, because I don't want to like put the two and two together, because oftentimes I think now in modern society, we're very good at like putting labels on people. This person, oh, they're not confident. This person is confident. This person is this. This person is that. And it's so easy. You hear something from someone, and I'm sure that, someone can hear this and be like, oh, well, that's because he wasn't confident before. And that's where I think that fine line is, because it's like, is there a line between being confident and not being confident? And then is there another line, a whole nother line of like dealing with rejection and not dealing with rejection well? And are those separate lines? And that's where I think stuff kind of gets like blurry for me. And so maybe there's people listening to this that know the answer to that. And I'm sure there's professionals out there that know the answer to this. But I say that to say that one thing that has really helped me with this is actively working on like my own confidence over the past like few years, and really like saying things and doing things with like full intentions, and being like, yes, I know that's the right thing to say. I know that's the right thing to do. And kind of like uplifting yourself at the end of the day and being like, hey, dude, you did a good job. Like, and you have to tell yourself that. I think it's really hard in society now to tell yourself that, hey, you're doing great. You're doing a good job. Because of what I was just saying is like, the second you start telling yourself that, people are like, oh, you're cocky. Oh, you're full of yourself. This person likes himself too much if they're like praising themselves. And it's a very weird thing, and you're afraid of like being called cocky, and maybe that's why you don't want to like kind of uplift yourself, or maybe that's just one reason. There's several different reasons why, but for me, it's like I have to kind of be like, all right, hey, you did the right thing, good job, and like give yourself that little pat on the back. Tell yourself you did a good job, and that helps me, because I think when you're confident with other people and you show them that you're confident, they know that you're someone they can trust. They also know that you know what you're doing. You're kind of getting your act together. You've got things in line. So then they're like, all right, I don't even have to like bat an eye to this like potentially horrible situation. They just think, all right, this person's got it together. And I know this sounds really weird to say, but I think that's what has like helped me a lot. And I think that's kind of made me be like, all right, now I can try doing this. Now I can do that. And that's kind of also what's led me to make this episode. Another thing that has really helped me is watching YouTube videos and listening to other podcasts and listening to other people talk about this. And even if it's just like a 1 or 2 minute little interval of something I'm listening to, and someone like brings up a situation and I'm like, oh wow, like I've dealt with that too. And it makes you feel good knowing that you're not the only one that I guess deals with this or has this thing. And it's very like comforting. So I would suggest like looking up YouTube videos, watching, other people talk about it, or just talking to a professional would be probably the best thing if you're in the position to do so. But that's probably all I have for this episode. And I think that, again, this is something that I'm not the expert on. I don't have all the like facts. So hopefully you were able to use this episode as just kind of a thing to listen to, hear my experiences, take it with how you want to take it, and maybe you have something to learn from this. I don't know. However you want to interpret it, that's awesome. But if you are new here, or even if you're not new here and you're someone who actively listens, thank you very much for listening. And I'm going to keep this on YouTube only. This is a YouTube exclusive episode. So appreciate you listening. Hit that subscribe button too if you haven't already. Hopefully by the next few months we can hit like 200 subs on this channel. That would be awesome. And yeah. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.